I was waiting to see how long it would take the real Jake Cardigan to thaw out.
A mid-90s television series about an ex-con and former cop turned detective in a future where people use this thing called the internet.
Yeehaw! It has left the back door wide open.
It's a world of addictive tech controlled by the Tek Lords, and it's a TV show based on a series of books officially created by one William Shatner.
What you've got is junk. It isn't worth a keystroke.
Tek War.
Still got a copy of it anywhere?
No, but I can get one off the Matrix. If you want to scope it out, just take a nanosec.
Based on the books by William Shatner, and I'll leave it up to you where you put the inverted commas, Tek War started as a series of television movies originally screened in 1994 that led to a single season of adventure shows from late 94 through to early 96. In the future, Tek is a hyper-addictive type of virtual reality that basically turns its users into junkies. Most of the organised crime is linked in some way or other to Tek Lords, crime bosses who are almost undefeatable.
Cardigan. How pleasant.
A cop addicted to Tek is sentenced to 15 years penal freezitude and is then defrosted early, where he becomes an investigator for a private company. His name, Jake Cardigan. I totally get it. I know if I'd been put in a freezer for a few years, I'd want something warm to wear when I got out.
So you tell him it's Jake Cardigan.
Cardigan tries to redeem his past failings by starting a new life where he tracks down villains whose crimes are linked to new technologies.
Tech overdose.
Tek War is a mid-90s cyberpunk light action-adventure series set in the year 2044, by which time I really should have finished watching some of those very long-running shows that I've been putting off. I mean, that's enough time to get through all 10 seasons of Smallville for review, especially if I get my skates on and actually start to watch Smallville. There's always this massive block when staring down the barrel of watching a very long series with something like 10 or more seasons, just so I can make a video a year or two later. For Tek War, that's not a problem. 4 TV movies and 18 one-hour episodes. It sounds like an absolute doddle. You'd think so, but anyway.
I will kill you.
In the 1980s, William Shatner was known for 2 main roles. One was the tough TV cop T.J. Hooker, and the other was starring as Captain Kirk in Star Trek, which at the time meant a movie every 2 or 3 years. He'd apparently had ideas about creating his own stories that perhaps combine those genres, crime drama and science fiction.
You lucked out. You got me.
When William Shatner had some time on his hands during a writer's strike, he began work on a novel, Tek War. Now, that's the short version. The long version is Shatner wrote an outline that was fleshed out by prolific writer Ron Goulart, an author who has so many professional aliases that he could be mistaken for Jason Bourne. 9 books were eventually published under the banner of William Shatner's Tek War, which does seem a much more marketable, if not entirely accurate title.
But that's irrelevant now.
There was Tek War, Tek Lords, Tek Lab, Tek Vengeance, Tek Secret, Tek Power, Tek Money, Tek Kill, and Tek Net. They, of course, never published my unofficial Tek War trilogy, Tek the Money and Run, Every Breath You Tek, and Take a Chance, Take a Chance, Take a Chance, Chance.
Actually, I'm rereading it. William Shatner, Tek Wars.
The books probably sold well enough at the time, so television seemed the next logical step. The books were set 200 years in the future, and well, if you're a television producer looking to make a relatively modestly budget science fiction show for basic cable or syndication, something set 200 years in the future sounds like it could be expensive to make. So perhaps if you cut that to 50 years in the future, maybe you could make it for, I don't know, a quarter of the money. With financial smarts like that, I should be able to retire by the time I hit 195. Detective Jake Cardigan had been a cop who'd become addicted to tech, but he was also framed by Tek Lords, which led to a 15-year sentence in the prison freezer. He was paroled after 4 years and was offered a job working for Cosmos, a private security consultancy run by the man who arranged his early release, the enigmatic Walter Bascom. While Jake was away, his wife Kate divorced Jake and remarried with the intention of shielding their son Danny from his father's soiled reputation. He was a dirty Cardigan.
Well, I didn't know you were such a jerk.
As an employee of Cosmos, Cardigan will investigate various schemes of the Tek Lords for Bascom, while also looking for a way to clear his tainted name. I mean, maybe that's why he wears a jacket instead of a cardigan. Though, having said that, Jake Jacket sounds even dumber.
Oh, come on.
Jake Cardigan is an excellent investigator with a cop's nose, along with cop hair, cop ears, cop feet, a cop's gut instinct, a cop's broken marriage, and a cop's estrangement from his kid.
My gut burns like hell.
Jake often leaves the really complicated technical stuff to his associates, though he's still relatively tech-savvy. When he was released, everybody hated Jake. His son didn't want to know him, his ex-wife Kate wants to keep him far away, and her new millionaire businessman husband really has it in for Jake. Kate will eventually soften her opinion of Jake, especially after her new husband turns out to be in business with the Tek Lords. Jake Cardigan will also slowly rebuild his relationship with young Danny.
Help me clear my name. It's a tall order.
As an operative of Cosmos, Jake will act as a private detective, investigating cases and occasionally working with law enforcement agencies. In short, whatever is needed for that episode. And as it's a cyberpunk-esque series, every plot is based around technology of some sort. A new type of tech, a different new type of tech, a thing that will destroy tech, a tech lord who has a beef with somebody, or somebody who has a beef with tech lords. Occasionally, it's just some other type of technology.
The tech lords do not care about remote control cooking, believe me.
By the time of Tek War, Greg Evigan had already starred in a few series. My favourite was the Glenn A. Larson series, BJ and the Bear, an adventure series about a trucker who had a chimpanzee buddy. History does not record how many deleted scenes there are of BJ hosing out the cabin.
Gee, I didn't know that.
Evigan would star in other series and movies, as well as having had a long career in music. He's the sort of guy who could play a character like Jake Cardigan standing on his head. Though I wouldn't try this at home, it's the quickest way to break your phone.
You understand? No, I don't. Explain.
Sid Gomez, played by Eugene Clarke, was Jake's buddy and former partner.
He's buying donuts?
12 credits, please.
Oh, man.
He was the first person Jake saw after being put on the defrost cycle. Sid is one of the few people who didn't abandon Jake after his conviction, and he's now in the private sector working for Cosmos. Sid is obsessed with trying out the latest in electronic gadgets, even if they don't always work the way they're supposed to. And he'll be Jake's partner in crime, well, for a little while.
This guy seems like a brother to me.
Doesn't say much for your mama.
Walter Bascom, the head of Cosmos, is a man who plays his cards so close to his chest that he'd need to apply some sort of lubricant in order to stop them from sticking to his skin. He's often portrayed as manipulative and somewhat deceitful, though he's almost always proven to be benevolent. William Shatner is yet another Canadian actor who I've never ever heard of, and never seen appearing in anything else. I mean, Tek War must have been some sort of final frontier for this unknown actor. But he does go quite boldly where some guy had gone before.
Commissioner Haskell wants more proof that there's a threat to internet.
Bascom's defining trait is a benevolent smugness, where he almost always sort of knew something was going to happen, but he just didn't tell anybody else. Now, I have a mate like that. He always tells us that he knew that that was going to happen. It doesn't matter what it was, he always just knew that that was going to happen. Mind you, he also claims to be a time traveller from 70 years in the future, but of course the laws of time preclude him from telling me the numbers for the big lottery jackpot.
If the Matrix shuts down, so does the city.
Jake first met Beth Kittredge as an android, but would later meet the original human version, where the pair would fall in love. Now that is Jake and the real Beth, not the real Beth and the bot Beth. Though, of course, we never learned if Jake had a bot on the side. Beth Kittredge was a brilliant scientist in the field of, well, anything the series needed that week. Robotics, the internet, tech. If the series had needed somebody who was an expert, say, on the history of beanbags, then Beth would be right on it. Torri Higginson was a regular star on Canadian-produced series and would later be a regular on Stargate Atlantis.
We never had a fair chance. It could have worked out.
If it could have, it would have.
Higginson left the series after only a few weekly episodes when, as far as everybody else was concerned, Beth was killed, while only Jake knows the explosion that apparently killed her was faked as a way to protect her. In the series, Natalie Radford as Nika was usually to be found at Cosmos as a master hacker, or is that a mistress hacker? Either way, she knows how to use a computer.
This trail is warming up. Give me full afterburners.
Police Lieutenant Sam Houston, played by Maria Del Mar, worked alongside Jake on a few cases as a cop before eventually joining Cosmos as Jake's new partner and best friend. Though aside from one date that got sidetracked by work, they would remain just good friends.
Good friends?
We're not having sex, if that's what you mean.
There are a few recurring characters, though most of them appeared either in the TV movies or the series. Only a few appeared in both. Lieutenant Winger, played by Maurice Dean Wint, was an uptight police detective, but he's an android or a mech. His programming seems to be stuck on the dickhead who works in the next cubicle. You know, your office nemesis whose ringtone is, "I just called to say I love you," despite the fact he only ever gets calls from scammers.
There's one problem with perfection. Boring as hell.
The original Lieutenant Winger mech turned out to have been a rogue who was part of the group that originally framed Jake. The replacement Winger was a little less evil, but his programming was still set to man who can't get rid of the smell memory of visiting a Limburger factory.
There ain't no trace for last online. I have to pop up to the next level.
Jake will also occasionally enlist the help of underground hacking crew of the Cyberjocks with characters like Wildside and Cowgirl, where, since it's the 1990s, hacking looks a lot more fun and nobody wears a hoodie.
She's trying some evasives. Turn up the heat, Wildside.
Even for a show with so few episodes, Tek War still didn't maintain much of a regular cast. Greg Evigan is the only actor to appear in each of the 4 movies and the 18 series episodes. The characters played by both Higginson and Clarke were written out. Bascom had a different assistant in the movies, and there were multiple actors playing Jake's son, Danny.
Things are never simple with you, Jake.
Tell me about it.
Apart from those actors you'd see in a lot of Canadian series, there are a few familiar faces: Sheena Easton, Sundal Bergman, Nicole DeBoer, Michael York, and Barry Morse.
How do you know this?
Because we saw it.
In the world of 2044, everybody has electric vehicles. All trades are through digital transactions, and everything is about the web, the net, the matrix. Stopping the spread of tech and trying to bring the tech lords to justice is the series' main focus. Of course, when this series was originally written, the word tech was a find and replace for drugs. So drug lords or crime lords became tech lords. They're the top of whatever organised crime syndicates exist in this world. We'd see different tech lords each time, but only Sonny Hokori would face off against Cardigan in multiple TV movies. He had been responsible for Cardigan's original arrest, and he'd finally been captured, but then his long-dead sister came back as an AI, and then lastly, after he'd been mutilated, he tried to kill Jake one last time.
This is where you killed your partners, right where you're standing.
Watching Tek War now, the focus on addictive technology being pushed by tech lords regardless of the human cost seems more relevant than ever. Not that Tek War really has anything to say apart from bad stuff is bad, but it does a decent job of extrapolating how reliance on technology can hinder rather than help human development. It does seem like the first act of pretty much every episode will spend time setting up the technology featured in that episode, a new technology that will allow Sam to go undercover as a gangster and temporarily forget her own personality. But of course, something goes wrong and she might never come back. An old girlfriend of Jake is killed, but her decoy body double has her memories and wants Jake to find the killer, or Nika is sucked back into the world of illegal hacking. Though most of the time it's just a wrapper for a story that ends up as a variation of old standards from detective or cop stories.
Find the bastard and we eradicate him.
Jake's on trial again and in prison while he's represented by a very young defense lawyer.
What are you talking about?
There are lots of computer viruses. Jake leaves Cosmos to join an anti-tech task force.
It was fun at first. It really got me going.
A video game, of course, turns its players into killers. Well, that was a given.
Call it a violence virus.
And of course, amnesia. Where would television be without amnesia? Jake wakes up with the last 11 months' worth of memories missing. He doesn't recognize Sam.
Who the hell are you?
And worse, he has to go through the grief of learning about why Beth and Sid aren't there. That, of course, lasts about one scene before it's back to work.
You check for address fragments in the file slack?
Yeah, I went through all the trash. Nobody's home.
Give me a 6K probability filter, would you?
To cover up a lot of the cop show cliches, there's a lot of made-up jargon that's supposed to sound cool and organic. Tek War is the sort of premise that doesn't really exist without computers, and it was made at a time when computers were becoming more and more mainstream. I mean, I've never understood them myself. I mean, I've been told they're quite useful for writing letters to the editor, spreadsheets for tracking football stats, quality smut, and of course some primo quality smut set in the world of tracking football stats.
But I want to know what happened.
There was a lot of technology invented for a particular episode, various virtual reality headsets, or just other ways to be inside somebody's head, or for someone to experience a fake reality. There were the morph masks, which allowed someone to wear a fake hologrammatic face, and Jake used a non-lethal plasma weapon.
The Matrix.
Oh, boy. Well, no wonder you're keeping such a lid on this, huh?
Jake Cardigan, despite only being out of circulation for a few years, is sometimes there as the audience identifier. But at other times, he's as tech-savvy as that 12-year-old who hacked into the army mainframe. So the next time your mobile device is playing up, give it to a 12-year-old. But first, rip off the masking tape with all of your passwords written on it.
Which means this isn't about who he wants to kill.
No, it's about who he thinks I want him to kill.
In the 1990s, there had been a resurgence in the number of genre shows being made. Science fiction and action-adventure shows had mostly dropped off the schedules of American networks, but first-run syndicated series like Star Trek The Next Generation showed that there was quite a big market for this type of show, provided they weren't as expensive to produce. Fans would now have an embarrassment of riches when it came time for science fiction-themed shows, even if many of them weren't all that rich, and sometimes they were a bit of an embarrassment.
You worry too much.
Shows made for syndication or basic cable channels often paid the cast and crew much less than they would for a network series. But even with much lower budgets, you still had to try and compete somewhat with the production values of more expensive rivals.
And then there was Tek.
Action Pack would be an umbrella title for a series of revolving wheel television movies. Tek War would launch this cycle, where, if the movies were successful enough, a weekly series would follow. Of the series that were made, it was really only Hercules that lasted longer than a season, though of course it's since been overshadowed by its much more popular spin-off, Xena Warrior Princess. For these 4 Tek War movies, later rebranded as Season 1, 3 of them would take inspiration from Tek War books.
Let me guess where this is going.
But they refused to read any of the spec scripts I sent them. Tek on Me, Tek My Breath Away, Tek Care, and Tek Me Out to the Ball Game.
Here's how it shakes out for me.
Tek War was a co-production between Universal Television and Canadian company Atlantis Films, who would co-finance many series made in Canada. Now, if a producer wanted to stretch their dollar further, they'd convert them into loonies and set up shop in a Canadian production hub. You had lower costs and access to a pool of actors who didn't have to do all that much to speak in an accent that wasn't too different from American cast members.
A lot of people still find it socially unacceptable.
If the writers could avoid using certain giveaway words in the script like out, about, and sorry, then viewers would be none the wiser.
And I'm trying to find out. You know, your orbiting me does nothing to speed the process.
Tek War was created by William Shatner, who is listed at number 7 on the Stam Fine list of Canada's greatest gifts to the world, somewhere between Poutine and Celine Dion.
I call it a complete screw-up.
The television version of Tek War is rather lower down the list, where it would be made in and around Toronto.
No one knows that. Not even Jake Cardigan.
Tek War started as 4 movies. In those movies, there were various breathless adventures for Jake, Sid and Beth, with support from Walter Bascom and his assistant Centra. These movies tended to take a few more design risks than the later series, with a more eccentric design aesthetic for some of the clothes. Though the budget is used really effectively for a series set in the future. The scope's reasonably epic, and the production is not afraid to take a few large swings, though for some reason they brutally executed Carmen Sandiego in the first movie.
Pucker up.
These 4 television movies tended to spend more time on unpacking how Jake ended up in the prison freezer, where it's partly a conspiracy and partly down to his use of tech. One movie had a deposed British king looking to reclaim the throne, though it's again an excuse to cast Michael York as a king looking for Excalibur. The weekly series episodes would settle down to being a cyberpunk light detective series. The looks at the dangers of technological addiction are there, but in general, Tek Wars was a fairly superficial series. So is it good or is it bad? Is it worth it or is it a waste of time? Is it watchable or notchable? The answer to all of those questions is a definite maybe.
Gotta hit him in exactly the right spot.
Personally, I think it's alright. It's watchable, but in no way rises above being a generic action series with a fairly clunky science fiction wrapper.
No doubt about it.
So there are lots of fistfights and shootouts, so if that's your bag, then Tek War's for you. The main cast, when they weren't being killed off, are quite good to watch, and Greg Evigan does end up being the main reason you would still watch the series. He does his bit so effortlessly. As a science fiction series heavily based on what computers could do, a lot of the concepts do need to be explained to the audience, but then you also have to remember this is just mainly a detective series. So it's a watchable and relatively entertaining, switch your brain off and don't expect too many surprises type of show, but it's so rarely more than that. And that's the main issue. There's just nothing in the show that's all that memorable. So little of it will stick with you unless you somehow find a way to become invested in the characters. And that's the thing, outside of Jake, few of the other characters have much of a chance to be at all interesting. Some of the side characters do have an episode that will feature them more heavily, but it's really all about the cardigan.
I didn't do much besides tag along.
Cotton cardigan, woolen cardigan, polyester cardigan. Everybody else just seems so disposable.
I never saw so many die so fast.
Parts of the show revel in taking detective and crime cliches and taking what little they knew about cyberspace, hacking, virtual reality and video games, and then grafting them onto some pretty basic story that will require, I don't know, Jake to go undercover or to break into something or to investigate somebody's death.
Yes, gently. Careful with her. Thank you. Thank you. Down!
Like the books, William Shatner's involvement behind the scenes was also fairly limited.
Excuse me, I've got another meeting.
He was listed as an executive producer and would also direct a few installments.
As Cosmos goes, so does the world. I want the Matrix up and running, end of story.
The 4 introductory movies are a lot of fun. They cram a lot of plot and action into their 90-minute runtimes, and they do have a feeling of grandeur. As for good episodes of the weekly series, they often tended to blur into one another, which is usually a sign that I wasn't finding it all that interesting this time around.
Sorry.
A few episodes stood out as really enjoyable. I really enjoyed the episode focusing on Winger, where he went from one of the most irritating creations to one of the best. For various reasons, he's missing some part, without which he will soon die. He enlists Jake to help him regain his mojo, and this episode actually makes Winger a great character to watch. It's pretty much the only time we ever looked at the world of androids in Tek War.
And his name is Jake Cardigan.
The final episode's also memorable. After being missing for most of the show, William Shatner appeared as Bascom in the last 2 episodes, with the final show being directed by him. It was written by his daughter Lisbeth Shatner, and guest starred another daughter, Melanie Shatner.
What you're saying is unthinkable.
You hired me to think the unthinkable for you.
Jake Cardigan's prison therapist has been treating him for his freezer-induced nightmares. Meanwhile, Cosmos has a mole and everyone's a potential suspect, even Jake Cardigan. Walter Bascom, who's shown very little emotion throughout the show, seems very cut up about Jake being a potential suspect.
This is personal. There's blood on both our hands.
Cardigan starts to believe everybody has turned against him, but it's part of a plot by a protege of Bascom's who turned into a villain. Jake spirals out of control when he's wanted for murder, not for the first time in this series.
What am I doing?
And it leads Jake to being convinced by his therapist that he must kill Bascom. It made for a solid season finale, but also works as a decent final episode for the series.
You're too damn sure of yourself.
I'm just damn sure of you.
As for some things that Tek War did really well, they used the budget really effectively in creating something that felt like a believable world 50 years in their future. I mean, it's far less than that now, so some of its ideas of where things were going in terms of technology may seem a little quaint.
Hello. Look at this.
Its idea of mobile technology is very, very 1990s, particularly the video flip phones. It's also a world full of large flat panel screens. Being sent to prison means you are snap frozen, and the adway is a road that blasts giant advertisements at you while you drive.
Simple enough.
Compared to some of the television movies, the scope is reduced for the series episodes, particularly towards the end of the season. But production design, atmospheric lighting, and a lot of judicious set dressing helps the illusion of being set in the future, which I now freely admit at the time of posting this is now less than 20 years in the future. So I'll be sure to get in my pre-order for one of those retro future retro flip phones.
And this has got high tech written all over it.
Computer graphics and video effects are used to expand the scope, and it's done quite well for a mid-90s series, especially made on a fairly decent but not huge budget. It probably looks a little more naff if you happen to know Toronto and you can point out which building they used here and there, or which terminal at the airport they filmed in.
But when that guy fires a synapse, no stopping him.
This is an era where the final product was mastered on standard definition videotape, so the series will always look like this with its mid-90s effects. Most of the time they're quite decent, just very mid-90s. Also very mid-90s, that old man on Facebook tempting fate by talking about the telegram that he's expecting from the king any day now.
Whatever bond we had is broken. There's nothing between us anymore.
And this is an incredibly minor technical point, but if anyone who actually worked on Tek War in a technical capacity is watching this, I would be really curious to know if the 1-hour episodes were shot on film like the telemovies appear to have been, or if they were recorded on a video format like Betacam. I don't know one way or the other, there's just something about the way the 1-hour episodes look. Now that could just be the DVD, or maybe my cataracts have started breeding.
Maybe that's it.
I had not seen all of Tek War back in the day, but I had rented the television movies from Blockbuster and enjoyed them enough at the time. I later had the chance to watch the series, but I'm fairly certain I bailed after a few episodes.
I convinced him that what he was doing was terribly wrong and that he had to stop.
In the 90s, I was just so happy that there were so many new science fiction programs.
That doesn't necessarily mean anything.
But at some point you do realize how few of them are actually all that good. And also that you don't have time to watch all of them.
Well, that's an unhappy thought.
Even though I mentioned how the relatively short length of the series meant that it shouldn't have taken all that long to watch, it did take me a few months to watch the whole thing, mainly because it just wasn't as engaging as the other series that I was watching for review around the same time. So, should I just watch some more X-Files or Terrorhawks or whatever, or should I watch Tek War?
Probably.
There were times where I did have to force myself to press play.
You get over yourself.
As I said, I didn't think it was egregiously bad, but it is nothing special. There will of course be fans of Tek War, both of them, who will be fired up in the comments section.
Why draw attention to ourselves?
So, if you enjoyed Tek War, I am very happy for you.
I seriously doubt that.
If you dislike Tek War, well, I also don't think it's all that bad either. However, it's a little bit generic, ordinary, and a little forgettable. It's very much like a packet of discount store branded chips called Shingles that, through a critical flaw in packaging design, are stale before they even get to the stores.
This is a joke.
Much of the design aesthetic is more Back to the Future Part 2 rather than Blade Runner, but I do like the fact they took a swing at making this look very different. The production designers and effects people did a pretty good job in making this look like the future.
I know I'm grasping at straws, but damn it, I'm ready to grasp.
Watching Tek War does have me looking for other 1990s cyberpunk themed series. Maybe I'll give that late 90s Canadian-German co-production version of Total Recall a spin.
You see, and a deja vu.
Cyberpunk is a genre that's meant to be dark and gritty, a not particularly pleasant look at a dystopian future. Tek Wars is a little gritty, but the rough parts are heavily sandpapered down. It's a world where many don't actually intersect with tech, but of course if you do, it tends to be a one-way trip to every detective cliche that ever existed.
Translate that into English for me, please.
We'll start with Good, the main cast, though hardly anybody outside of Jake is developed in any major way. There are often too many characters introduced for a single episode that are rather basic, with of course some occasionally dodgy acting. The plots also don't often have much faith in the science fiction part of the series, instead relying on lots of punch-ups and shootouts. Now sure, that's probably what they wanted in the first place, but it just means stories don't really delve into the concepts that they spend so much time setting up in the first act. That makes the cool stuff seem very superficial. If you take all of that away, it's just a show about a PI where everybody dresses funny.
But I do have the power!
The show does look more expensive than it should, and most of the time does a good job of popping you in the 2040s for an hour. But overall, a lot of it is unremarkable, and you remember bits of it at best. If you can remember what most episodes were about 10 minutes after you watched it, then you are doing well. Personally, there were only 2 episodes, the ones I mentioned earlier, that I could actually remember the next day. So, of course, for switch your brain off television, it's fine. For something you'll go back to again and again, Tek War just does not seem to be that sort of thing.
I don't know what you're talking about. Get the hell out of here.
Tek War did not turn out to be the biggest thing ever, and so no further episodes were made. There had been a comic that ended around the time of the series' first broadcast, and there was a video game release in 1995. The last Tek War book would be published in 1997, and that was mostly it for Tek War. There, of course, were also my homebrew Tek War game projects that never got past modelling realistic weapons. There was Tetris, It Takes Two, but definitely not Tekken Tag Tournament.
Which means what?
There's been talk of some sort of new project in the Tek War universe, so a revival is not beyond the realms of possibility. It might be unlikely perhaps, but it's not impossible. But then again, they also said that about the IMAX release of the extended director's cut of Around the World in 93 days.
So you think your neurons are more powerful than mine?
Tek War was a short-lived dive into a time ruled by people addicted to computer worlds. Pfft, that would never happen. Unless, of course, it already has. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
That's ridiculous.
There's more.
You've got 4 out of 5 right on your specialist subject, William Shatner's Tek Wars.